Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day, where I want to take a look at some of the highlights from the schedule release of the NBA for the 2024-25 season. We've been getting, little bits of information dropped throughout the course of the week, but yesterday the full schedules were announced, and I want to start by looking at some of the numbers regarding the number of national TV games for some of the notable teams. The top couple, the Lakers with 39, the Warriors with 36, and then the Celtics and Knicks both with 34, Mavericks and Suns both with 30. But still LeBron James and Steph Curry's league, especially coming off of this year's Olympics, showing that they can still shine just as bright as anybody else. It's very clear that both of these are play-in tournament teams. At least they have been the past couple of years. To be honest, I still don't see them really overcoming a number of the teams that are ahead of them. Not to say that they can't be competitive and be playoff teams once again, but I think that the play-in tournament is probably just about what we're looking at again for the upcoming season in regards to the Lakers and the Warriors specifically. But it's the star power that wins out. And again, I'm sure the NBA would love to have, these up-and-coming younger players sort of taking over. But until that's the case, they're going to stick with LeBron and Steph Curry. By the way, very quickly on that note, the Spurs with 21 national TV games. And I'm not sure how many they had last year. It felt like a pretty good amount, which almost stunk because the Spurs were so bad last year that it's fun to watch Victor Wembanyama, but at the same time, they just aren't that good of a roster. But I do feel like eventually they're going to... I think this is a year where the Spurs take a step forward. So wanted to mention at least the 21 national TV games there, but Celtics at 34, tied for third on this list with the Knicks. I think that that's pretty fair, all things considered. I know, reigning champs, you feel like they should be featured maybe a little bit more in comparison to some of these other teams, but at the same time, I don't know, it just is what it is that LeBron and Curry, they are always going to be drawing the most amount of attention. So, outside of that, don't think that there's anything all too noteworthy in terms of the national TV games. The Nuggets are at 29, by the way, as well. Didn't mention them, but they're right on that same sort of trajectory as the other top contenders as well. So ultimately, I don't really have all too many complaints with it. Cavs at 16 feels a little bit low. I know that not that many people care about the Cavaliers because of who they are at this point, but it's a very good team with a lot of talent. 16 feels maybe slightly disrespectful to them, so that's also something that I noticed. And I'd say the Thunder might be a little bit low as well at 25 when you're talking about, young stars. I feel like that's a good team with the guy who just was runner-up for MVP last year in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So maybe feels a little bit low. But we've also gotten some information on the in-season tournament this season, which before I sort of give my thoughts on that, I do want to address a chat here from Anthony Manzano. He says, honestly, I think them introducing the in-season tournament kind of backfired on the NBA. He says, I understand it was for money, but I think they thought it was going to force teams take the beginning and middle of the season seriously instead of basically shining down halfway through the season and coasting and waiting for the playoffs. So I see what you mean. I do feel like it's definitely, first off, for money purposes. I think it's Ameritrade or now or something. They have a whole sponsor for the NBA Cup now. Obviously, it was always going to be a money ploy. I wouldn't say it backfired on them necessarily because we're still so early on into this process. But to be fair, I mean, the in-season tournament, especially when it started heating up to those elimination rounds, I mean, people were tuning into them. And we had Steph Curry and LeBron James buying into it. LeBron ending up leading the Lakers to the to the NBA Cup title or whatever. Again, it feels so like you're calling it a title. It's obviously not that heavy, but, you know, I digress there. But he ends up winning MVP. The Lakers win it. And, you know, I thought that there was some drama as well, having the Pacers and the Bucks. There was a little bit of contention there, foreshadowed a little bit to the playoffs. Same with the Pacers and the Celtics. So I ultimately did enjoy it. And I totally understand for those who aren't really interested in it, but it does give us something more to talk about during the regular season when, frankly, not that many people care about it. So I don't know. I think if it exists in its own right, that's the way to go. Where they could mess up is sort of guaranteeing any sort of postseason positioning. I know that idea has been thrown out there. Hate that. Because then, to your point, it's very early on in the season, and everybody's just sort of coasting and waiting for the playoffs. But I definitely... The idea is that the playoff hunt and the race there is what picks up that sort of final quarter, you know, or third of the regular season. But I definitely see what you mean. It's all of this noise, and then it's just sort of back to regular, and we got to wait another 6 months or so for the playoffs. So I hear you on that. But we also have a question from Anthony regarding how many national TV games do the Heat have based on the amount of games. Do you believe they could be one of the top teams in the East, or are they play-in tournament team? So they have 13 national TV games, which seems to be just around probably average, a little bit lower than that. I'd say they're probably, you know, bottom, looks like, I don't know, eyeballing it here, bottom 17. Kind of a crazy number to throw out there, but I do think that the Heat are an interesting team because you never want to write them off, especially with Eric Spoelstra running the show there, having a very talented player in Jimmy Butler. I feel like especially coming off of these Olympics, a lot more people had eyes on Bam Adebayo and sort of that he can do more than he's sort of just charted up to being. That I've been a Bam truther for a couple years now, and I'm glad that he is getting a little bit more shine. And the thing is with the Heat is, especially in years past, games played. That's been the number one stat for them. Whether it's Jimmy Butler dealing with injuries, Tyler Hero dealing with injuries, last season Terry Rozier down the final stretch of the year, he was out with a neck injury. The Heat need to actually be available. And that's what Pat Riley was very frank and a little bit, you know, direct about with Jimmy Butler, is you can't be doing all of this talking if you're not playing in games. And Jimmy's injury in the play-in tournament was a freak injury for sure, but it's also added on top of the fact that he and the rest of the team just haven't been as available as they needed. So I do feel like if they get a healthy year, their offense should be significantly better than it has in years past, because now you're adding some players who can give you real production in the half court, including the likes of a Terry Rozier. I think that he can be a bigger factor for them this upcoming season. He flashed very early on, or no, actually other way around. Terry Rozier was kind of struggling right when he got traded, but then I thought he started to hit his stride a little bit, and he was one of those half-court scorers that the Heat needed. Ultimately, again, ends up missing the final part of the season with that neck injury, so he can definitely was injured too much, to your comment, 100%. He says, what I'm worried about is the people around Jimmy and Bam being more consistent. Tyler disappears. Duncan can be too streaky. I totally hear you on that. I do like Jaime Jaquez Jr. for whatever it's worth as well. He has been a very nice sort of glue guy piece to throw in there as a late first rounder. Basically everything you possibly could have asked of him. He plays championship caliber basketball, and obviously when he is the guy on the court, sure, it's not going to look quite as great. That's not what Jaime Jaquez was drafted for, though. Ideally it's for being, you know, sort of a glue guy. I think an enhanced version of what Christian Brown was for the Nuggets in 2023. Like, I think Jaquez can be that and more. So I think it really does come down to their half-court scoring. I trust their defense, even though Tyler Hero, I mean, man, he can be so tough for them on that defensive side of the floor. You saw it in that series against the Celtics. But the Heat, I mean, they can be a little bit, they should be outside of the play-in tournament. But at the same time, I think the East is, the teams that are in the playoff mix, I don't think that they get enough credit from the casual NBA fan, where I think the Magic are legitimately good. Nobody wants to give the Pacers any respect. Sure, they benefited from injuries in the postseason, but that's a good team. And same with the Cavaliers as well. The 76ers were a play-in tournament team as well last year, so it's a little bit... It's not the East isn't quite as deep, but I think there's a lot of quality that could sort of keep the Heat out of it a little bit. But the last things I sort of want to hit on here in terms of the schedule itself is the NBA bringing back Rivals Week. I know they did it last year. I don't know how long this has been a tradition for them, but I think that they did ultimately a pretty solid job. Looking at sort of the top games that I'm looking forward to out of this year's rivalry week, I think Suns and the Mavericks are a good matchup just because of the Booker and Luka dynamic. That's a fun one. I'm definitely more of in the NBA right now, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of, real rivalries. I think player rivalries are a very real thing, which is why we're going to see, LeBron versus Steph and the Lakers versus the Warriors at the end of the week as well. But Suns, Mavericks, two playoff contending teams. That one I'm definitely interested in. The Celtics and Heat, I think that is a legitimate, team rivalry at this point. So that's a good one. You get Chet Holmgren versus Victor Wembanyama. Last year we saw when they faced off against one another, it seemed like there was a little bit of something. I wouldn't say it's personal necessarily, but they know they're two of the uniquely built 7-foot ball dominant guys that, a lot of eyes are on there. So that is a fun one to me. Kings Warriors is pretty good as well. Matchup of their playoffs a couple years ago. And then really, that's kind of it. They have other games in here. I don't like the default of just because you play near each other that you're rivals. Knicks Nets does nothing for me. Lakers Clippers could be good. Last year, obviously, I wonder if it was during rivalry week where there was that LeBron fourth quarter takeover. That was one of the highs of the season for LeBron and the Lakers. That one came against the Clippers, so that might have been a rivalry week game. I don't quite remember, though. And then, I don't know, some of these other ones, like Mavericks versus Hawks, I understand it's behind Luka versus Trey, but that's not a rivalry to me. It seems like they're at least sort of friends as well, but being traded for each other, I suppose I understand there. But, overall, and then the last one that I definitely am excited for is, Joel Embiid versus Nikola Jokic. So that should be a good one. And then, very last couple thoughts here because we are running out of time. The Christmas games, Victor Wembanyama is probably going to be continuing to play these Christmas games for a very long time. They're playing the Knicks. You have the Timberwolves versus the Mavericks, the Sixers versus the Celtics, Lakers versus the Warriors, and Nuggets versus the Suns. Overall, pretty good slate. Again, Spurs feel like they're probably, a little bit ahead of their timeline here just because the league wants to show off Wembanyama. But, interesting there. And then the very last thing we'll touch on here is the controversy about the Atlanta Hawks not playing on MLK Day for January 20th. I understand the Hawks are not a good team at this point in their current franchise state. They're not a horrible team, but they're not good. They're not must-see TV. But they also have the Hornets playing on MLK Day, which is just crazy to me because it's one of these, meaningful days in the NBA, and you have a Charlotte Hornets team that has given you, trust me, I'm big on Brandon Miller Island. I'm buying into the stock of Tijan Salon. I like the Hornets, but to put them over the Hawks for MLK Day was wild to me. But again, so much to dive into with the schedule that tried to cram all of it as much as we could into this segment, but that is all the time we have for today. So definitely let us know in the comment section some of your thoughts, and we can definitely address them in the comment section after the fact. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well for more exclusive short content. And we will be back Monday afternoon, same time as always at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. We will see you then. Have a great weekend. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.